Good morning. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. The last couple of years I've I've driven up from Bismarck, and I've had just a great time with the landowners. And for me, it's a really satisfying in a couple of ways. I get to try out some ideas about North Dakota, but I also learn from the landowners, from their comments and the questions, the formal ones during the program and then afterwards. And so I'm so sorry to miss that, but I have been thinking a lot about what you all stand for, and I've just finished my book. So you see behind me a map of North Dakota, and I've taken a Sharpie. I learned from President Trump. I've taken a Sharpie and I've circled the places where there are particular analyses or accounts in the book, and I've been thinking a lot about the kind of this paradox. Try, I guess I'll start there. So North Dakota has a long romance with family farming and family ranching. It's been the center of our economy. It has a special place in the heart of North Dakotans. It did. It's not just an income producing engine. It's a way of life. It's an ethos. It's a devotion. It's like a vocation. It's been central to the idea of North Dakota, the family farm. You know, when you say the words family farm, you say them with a certain emotional edge. And then along came the oil boom, and I think it's been good for the state in so many ways, but I think that it corrupted us a little bit, and a greed and immediacy and a kind of urgency to get in and get that oil butted up against that beautiful idea of the family farm and the family ranch. And I think it's created a lot of social tensions, and you all know this way better than I do. But it seems to me, and I say this carefully, but I feel like our obsession with oil extraction in some ways betrayed a much deeper value in North Dakota life, which is stewardship and family agriculture and the sanctity of property and so on. And so now that the oil boom has sort of diminished some, I feel like we can step back and take a deep breath and ask ourselves how well we have done and how we can prepare for whatever comes next. And when I think about that, I have a deep and particular concern about the landowner who doesn't also control the minerals. If you're the landowner who controls the minerals, that's kind of a separate category, because you can make decisions for the whole package. But if you're the landowner who owns the surface but not the minerals are owned by somebody else somewhere else, that, as you all know, creates a huge vulnerability. And I think that is something that we must address, and that it has not been very well addressed thus far in the history of extraction in North Dakota. And so what I've been thinking about, and you all know much better about all this than I do by far, but what if you produced a surface landowner's Bill of Rights, and you decided what those basic concerns were, some of which are probably already being met, and then you did a video of some sort where a document existed, but you also had a group of different surface owners speaking each of the planks, each of the positions. And so you had a young woman rancher talking about noise abatement, and you had an elderly male rancher talking about a dust abatement and so on. But you figured out what your 10 concerns are, or 5 or 15, and got them into the tightest language you possibly could. And then you distributed that document in the hopes that the legislature would at least take it under advisement as it pursues future legislation about extraction. But it would also become a kind of manifesto, especially if spoken by men and women, old and young, crusty North Dakotans and sort of new, younger, more hip North Dakotans and so on. I think it could be a really powerful way of inspiring each other, but also speaking pretty emphatically to the power structure of North Dakota about what your expectations are.
That's a really good thought there, Clay. It's things that you mentioned there that we have thought about. We have tried through public meetings, through rulemaking, through guidelines, and through legislation to try to help with some of this. But a true Bill of Rights for the current situation, people in the past have made strong efforts to try to deal with things of their time. Being a different time and different things before us, with everything from water issues to oil issues to wind issues to radioactive waste issues, more saltwater brine. It's something that I think we really should be looking at. And I like your idea of hopefully getting the citizens more active in that. That's a really good idea, Clay.
I think it could be done. Let's say you did a video and you had 10 planks in this Bill of Rights, and you had 10 different individuals speaking them in their home places. So they're not just in a studio somewhere with a green screen. You have a young woman rancher who's out on her land, and you see the cattle, and you see,
Yep.
if you saw, like in the Democratic National Convention last summer, did you know when they had that thing where people cast each state's votes, and they all were somewhere on location in their state?
Yep.
That was a brilliant idea that's made possible by Zoom technology. So if you had people on their land making their point, and even in some cases, people making their point on lands that have been degraded by energy development. But just to take one, for example, it seems to me that, and you tell me if this is already in place, but the rancher or the surface owner should have substantial control of the timing. So let's say I want to come in and get the oil on your ranch. I should have to sit down with you, and we should look at the calendar, your calving season, your branding season, when your cattle are most likely to be spooked by industrialization, and so on. And the oil company should have to work out a development timeline plan with you that spares you as much impact as it possibly can. And then there should also, it seems to me, be a timeline window that this has to be done within X number of months. It can't play out over 3 or 4 years if things in the oil economy change. That seems to me to be the minimal respect. But I would like to see it codified so that there has to be this level of high front-end cooperation on every disruption of surface activity on a viable North Dakota ranch. It's something else if it's in the Badlands, but if it's on somebody's ranch, that matters.
Yeah, speaking to that, Clay, that's probably been one of the more frustrating things is, as we know, most industries have a long-term plan, 5-year plan, 3-year plan. And with that, what we find on most development is there's steps to all that happening, their finance, their logistics, all of that. The one thing they always need is access to the surface, which they have the right to just take. We usually get the shortest amount of notice of any of the development processes that are in play. And so we've worked hard to get more notice and a more working relationship through that process, but it's still one of the biggest challenges. And generally, we don't see that level of front-end cooperation.
And Troy, it shouldn't, I hear what you're saying, but it shouldn't just be notice. It shouldn't be like you get a call or you get an email saying on such and such a day we'll be starting. It should be a friendly, cooperative development plan, so that it's not like we're going to start on Thursday. Hope you're okay with that. It's more, when would be useful for you? We want to make sure that if this is breeding season or calving season or whatever, or it's your holiday festival where you bring in your family reunion from all over the country, that we're not being disruptive. So I think notice is too clinical and too exploitative a term for this. And it seems to me, my whole point in all of this is that these are values that we have had for decades. This is not like creating new North Dakota principles. This is how North Dakota has operated since its beginning with a high level of friendliness and cooperation, and a belief that what a rancher or a farmer is doing is the most important thing that can be done within the state of North Dakota, and that everything should not tiptoe around it, but it should show great respect. Here's another one. I think that if, obviously you want to do noise abatement and dust abatement. I think dust abatement is extremely important because of the respiratory issues that can come up not only for cattle, but for people. But I also think if the oil company is going to come in and do some road work to get to its pad, then it should cooperate with the surface owner to say, is it possible for us to do infrastructural development that will benefit you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Can we do this in such a way that we're actually getting 2 for 1? We are getting in to get the oil that we need, but we're also helping you in the future have a more logical infrastructure on your own piece of property. And how can we minimize the aesthetic damage? Because, as you know, Troy, the company, whether it's located in Tulsa or Venezuela or Houston, that company can't care about the aesthetics of your ranch. All they care about is that there's a quantity of oil that they have a right to get, and they're going to come in and get it as inexpensively and efficiently as possible. That's their business. That's what capitalism is. But if we say, wait a minute, that's where my son practiced for his first rodeo, or that's where we had that great festival 10 years ago, or that's where I proposed to my husband or my wife, and the company said, we get it, that's for you. It may just look like land to us, but that's sacred land to you. And so I would like to see built into this a kind of a family sacred assessment, some kind of a notion where they say to you, you're the surface owners, we're going to come and get that oil. We've got to tell us the things you care about so that we can tiptoe around certain things if possible. And with the kind of drilling that we have today, there's no reason why that well has to be at spot X. It could be at spot Y, Z, A, D, or R and work its way in, and within some limits. And so I think that this is the theme I keep saying when I come up to meet all of you in person. If we don't tell the oil business what we value, they can't possibly know.
I agree, Clay, and that's on us, is to tell our story, just like we need to tell our story in production agriculture. We're not the best at that. We're people with dirt on our boots and dirt on our hands,
You're
working
modest.
with Mother Nature.
Your farmers and ranchers are modest. They're not professional public relations people. They tend to be very humble. That's the greatness about family agriculture. They're not assertive in a big way, and that's why a Bill of Rights is important. When the founding fathers were talking about a Bill of Rights, James Madison said, well, we don't really need one because it's just kind of a parchment guarantee. And Jefferson said, no, you want it written down so that when the company comes in, you can say, no, you have to have a dust abatement plan. No, you have to talk to us about siting and timing. And so these things then become a way of education for the surface owner, also education for industry and the legislature, but it gives you automatic talking points when you want to say, hey, wait a minute, you're coming in right at the beginning of calving season. This is going to be a nightmare for my family. It's one thing to say that, but if you know that you have a right to say that, and there is a statement about it that you can point to, that makes it so much more effective, I think.
Well, I totally agree. I'm glad that you're as versed in articulation of things as you are, because that's not my strong point. I definitely try, but I think this is a strong effort that we need to work on. We can't expect everyone else to figure this out on their own. So it's a job for all of us farmers, ranchers, and property owners of the state to do.
I think too, and this gets into slightly more controversial zone, but I think that the surface owner should be more highly compensated for the disruption. I think two things. First of all, there should be a bonding system, and maybe there already is, where where many thousands of dollars have to go into an escrow account of some sort for the reclamation and for any unintended and inadvertent disruptions to the surface owner's life. And secondly, I think that the surface owner is entitled to a higher compensation for the disruption. You know, God put that oil in western North Dakota. He could have put it in British Columbia or Wyoming or South Dakota or Minnesota. It's kind of accidental, Troy. We're fortunate to have it, but it's sort of accidental. And if we didn't have it, if we couldn't see below the surface, if we weren't an oil and natural gas economy, we would always prefer the surface owner's lifestyle, because that's been the heritage of North Dakota. You know, when these homesteaders came out from Norway or from Ukraine, they didn't say, I wonder if there is carbon below the surface that we should be thinking about for 100 or 200 years from now. They thought, how can we build a better way of life on these steppes, on these plains of North Dakota? And so that's what we have admired so much in the course of North Dakota history. It's made us who we are. It's the North Dakota character. And then suddenly along comes this resource that we can drill through your surface to get to, and that sort of has been given way more legal privilege than it deserves. And I think that it's a mistake to think that all of that wealth belongs to the mineral owner. It seems to me that the surface owner is entitled to a very high level of reward for sacrificing 1 year, 5 years, maybe 20 years of the family's life to the extraction of something that they otherwise don't particularly benefit from. Now, I know that's a long shot with the legislature or anyone else, but I think it's true, and I think it's fair, because so think of Art Link. You know, I've just printed out this morning Art Link's "When the Landscape is Quiet Again" speech that he made in 1973 in Mandan. And the last paragraph is so important. He said, you know, when we're through with it, when the drag lines have gone off and the power shovels and so on, he said, we must leave the land in as good shape or better shape than it was before the extraction. That has to be our goal. And he said, only if we can do this will we be worthy of the rich heritage of our land and our people. That we have to make sure that when the idea of the Bakken is in the rear view mirror, that there's health in the ranch and surface community of North Dakota, because that will be here forever. The oil will be gone at some point.
I definitely agree. That's kind of the reason I'm involved, is, you know, the future generations that will be on our farm. Farmers and ranchers and property owners, we think in generational terms, you know. Extraction of whatever resource is usually in a quantity kind of thinking. And our group has never been one to be against any type of development. We just want it to be done in a appropriate, thoughtful approach, everybody getting treated equitably. And so I really like this thought, Clay. It's something that we definitely need to work on, for sure.
You all, of course, would need to articulate it. I would be very happy to work with you in doing it, but it's your world, and you all understand it more intricately by far than I do. I just want to add one more piece to this, and that is, I think that one of the biggest problems is, what do we do about reclaiming lands that have been damaged? And some of them are being damaged now through spills and other problems, but some of them have been damaged historically in the last two booms, but particularly the one from the 70s and 80s. So what happens with this? And you know, the state government has been extremely skeptical, let's put it that way, and reluctant to go in and fix the problems that were left behind during the last hectic carbon extraction episode in North Dakota. I think that we should have a plan so that a certain percentage of all oil and natural gas wealth now is put into an account designed to reclaim as much of that acreage as can be reclaimed. But it seems to me to be unacceptable that we are inviting new development and presuming that it's safe, while we haven't yet even cleaned up some of the worst mistakes from the last round 30 or 40 years ago. And so I would like to see the state's not going to do this. It's not just going to appropriate the money for this, because it's going to say, where will the money come from? But if we said, if oil company X wants to come into McKenzie County, it has to lay down 0.5% of oil profits, or 0.25% into an account that builds to reclaim and fix some of the damage that was done in this period. Otherwise, it'll never happen. And you know, if you don't go in and fix it, then you're just waiting for geologic time to fix it, and none of us is going to see that kind of time. So my question is, do we all agree that this should be done? I think you do.
Yes.
If it's going to be done, how should it be done? What's the mechanism? Because I know from talking to your landowners that many times they have made earnest contact with state government, and both in the bureaucratic side and in the legislature, and explained what happened and why it's so important. And although there's some sympathy, there's very little action from the government of North Dakota. And I think we could build this in, because if I'm X oil company and I want to come in and get, you know, 1 million barrels a day somewhere, there is enough money for me, for this company, to be helping to reclaim past mistakes. And I think we should make that the cost of doing business in those counties, and it should stay in the county. So the fund should be for McKenzie County, those funds should stay in, and for Billings County the same. But I don't think it's fair. The part that's really offended me and bothered me when I come up and inspect some of these lands is that I see things that happened, and they say, well, they talked to the state, and the state denies that it's even the case sometimes. And if it doesn't deny that it's the case, it says, what can we do? Well, I don't think that's the spirit of stewardship. The spirit of stewardship should be that we actually make North Dakota a better agricultural homeland than it has ever been, not one where we slowly degrade it and then somehow say King's X.
I am completely on that line of thinking. We have tried to set the groundwork for some of the things you've mentioned. The last couple of legislative sessions have been very tough to make progress on that. We've brought forward legislation on trying to have a upfront reclamation fund and plan and work towards some of those things. That's not been the current trend. We're definitely trying. We're going to try again this session. Thank you, Clay. I always appreciate visiting with you. You're a very special individual.
I love all of you. I love this state. I hope you'll all reward me by buying my book. It'll be out in May. It's called The Language of Cottonwoods. But you have all inspired me, and you know, I believe I'm an Art Link, North Dakota, and I believe that the highest and best use of North Dakota is agriculture. I'm very concerned about where agriculture is headed. We can have that conversation another time. But I think that if we damage the family farm heritage of this state, and we're doing it, that we're selling the greatest of our birthrights for a mess of carbon. And it's just absolutely unacceptable to me, morally and in terms of the sustainability of agriculture. And so I so admire what all of you stand for and what you do. You know, you do real things. I just talk. And I hope that you will consider doing a surface owner's bill of rights. I think if you do, you'll get attention, and that attention is the beginning of enlightenment. And if I can help in any way, count me in. And I'm so sorry I can't be up there, because whenever I drive from Bismarck to that facility you go to south of Stanley, I get a chance to see the first mosque in North Dakota. I get a chance to see ICBM missile sites. I get a chance to go to these villages. I get to see Ann Nicole, the grave site of the North Dakota young woman who was killed in the World Trade Center. I make a pilgrimage to all of these places, and I love it. And so I'm just so sorry I can't do it this weekend, but I wish you all happy holidays.
Thank you, Clay. Take care.